Hello, and welcome to the Full Circle Healing Podcast, where we merge modern cutting-edge science with traditional healing wisdom and everything in between to help you come full circle, back to your original, natural state of health and well-being. I'm your host, Michael, and over the last 15 years, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people find the information, practices, tools, resources, and experts they needed to find their way back to optimal health. Our guest in this episode is my friend and go-to source of health information for kids, Dr. Elisa Song. Dr. Song is a Stanford, NYU, UCSF-trained integrative pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert, and mom to 2 thriving children, who's on a mission to revolutionize the future of children's health. Dr. Song is also the best-selling author of the Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, an integrative pediatrician's guide to whole child resilience book, which sits on my shelf as we're currently raising a little one ourselves. In her integrative pediatric practice, she's helped thousands of kids get to the root causes of their health concerns and empowered patients to help their children thrive by integrating conventional pediatrics with functional medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and other natural-minded approaches. In this episode, you're going to learn how the gut-brain connection shapes kids' health, immunity, emotions, and more, how to cultivate microbiome magic to prevent childhood allergies, skin issues, mood disorders, and chronic health conditions, how to make mealtime fun and healthy with the POP, Plants on Purpose method, and the 3 F's every parent should focus on, and practical ways to teach kids mindfulness, breathing, nervous system regulation, and vagus nerve stimulation practices that will help their health and wellness as children and as they grow into adults. And if you'd like to learn some of those breathing practices right now that you can start right away with your kids, head over and grab my Breathing for Nervous System Regulation ebook at rebelhealth.co/breathing. Now let's go learn how to make healthy, fun, and practical for your kids with Dr. Song. And we're live, another episode of the Full Circle Healing Podcast, and we are here with Dr. Elisa Song. Dr. Song, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. I always love chatting with you.
Me too. I have such fun conversations with you, and it's the only time I really doing this talk a lot about children's health. And now that I have a little guy, my other child was pretty much grown up by the time I started working in this field. So now that I have a little guy around, these conversations I'm more drawn to them, but it's still fascinating to see and hear what's going on with kids' health that's mimicking and kind of following trajectories of adults' health, for better or worse. And today we're going to talk about a different angle. I know we've done presentations and conversations around like toxins in kids and stress in kids and hormones in kids for the masterclass we just recorded. But this is more about like practicality and how to, your book has incredible recommendations and tips and suggestions. And I guess first I want to ask, like, are kids really that much different than we are as far as the things that are good for their health versus things that I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast might already be thinking they need to do for themselves, but they might not equate that for their kids? Are they that different?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, in the sense that, kids' brains and microbiomes and immune systems are developing so rapidly. So that opens up a couple of things. I mean, on the one hand, because they are in the process of really developing into their adult-like state, I mean, from the inside out, any hit or hits to their immune system, their microbiome, their nervous system can have downstream very long-term consequences on their future health, even when they're adolescents or adults. So, there is this sort of, we have to be a little bit more careful because the impact could be more severe. At the same time, there's such plasticity. We know that even in adults, brains have so much plasticity, but oh my gosh, I mean, kids' brains have so much plasticity in their infants, toddler years. I mean, with Elliot, I mean, just the next morning, you're like, oh, he's a different kid, right? He's like doing different things. And that same thing, that same explosion happens in your, tween and teen years. I mean, your brain doesn't stop developing. And same thing with our microbiomes. I mean, a lot of people listening have heard of the first 1,000 days of microbiome development, how important that is, the first 2.5 years. But, guess what? The microbiome also has a dramatic increase and shift in your pubertal years. So when you're, again, a tween and teen, and same thing with our immune system. And so we have these opportunities where we can continue to make these shifts for the better if we know how. And all of the foundations that folks listening to this podcast are already thinking about for themselves, and how they're eating and living and, sleeping and doing all of that, it absolutely applies to children. And when we understand the foundations of why those apply and how to apply those to kids, we have this, I think just these golden opportunities to help kids become even more resilient and healthier through their lives.
Thanks. And so you mentioned plasticity a lot, and I think neuroplasticity is, kind of how the brain tends to rewire itself. And that's talked about a lot now for adults. Like, you want to learn a new habit, so you do this in a certain way, and you reward yourself, and it forms these new connections in the brain. So you're saying that happens faster or easier for kids, or both?
Both. Their brains are remodeling every day. The thing, though, that we have to understand about brain development in kids, brains develop from kind of the back forward. And so the back is really our senses, our emotions. And as we move further and further forward, we have our prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for rational decision making. And that really, doesn't start to fully develop until you're a teenager. And it's still not completely developed until you're really in your 20s. For boys, it's not until you're in your late 20s. And then add on top of that, if you have ADHD or other neurodevelopmental concern, probably later, right? We can see that even in some 30-year-olds, you're like, oh, your brain's still developing, right? And so, these kids, we can start to really see they can, I think, even at very young ages, fully understand the impact of their choices. As we kind of speak about it in, age-appropriate terms, but we want to give our kids way more credit for understanding and being able to pick up these nuances in the way we're living and how we're going about our day-to-day lives. It's just that the rational decision-making prefrontal cortex isn't always kicked in. And so there's the difference between the knowing and the doing. And we as adults have enough trouble with that. We know that, right? How many times we're like, oh, we know we should get more sleep, but it's 10 o'clock at night. You're like, oh, I still want to watch this movie or read this book or doom scroll through Instagram, right? And so, and you choose to stay up, even though you're going to suffer for it later. So with kids, we just want to continue to inform them about, the different choices they can make, and help them notice, connect the dots between the decisions that they're making and how they're feeling, how their brain's feeling, how their body, their gut, how their immune system is reacting, so that they can continue to make those informed decisions. Right. And sometimes you still know, you're like, I know I'm going to feel like crap the next day, but I'm still going to do this thing. Right. Kids, of course, are going to do that same thing. And teens, of course, are going to do that thing. So we have to give them a little bit of grace, because, nobody is perfect. But then, you just say, oh, okay, well, how do you feel today after that? The 10 pounds of cake that you ate after the French fries and the pizza. Right. Well, let's just notice that. And let's think about the next time you have this opportunity of all of this food in front of you that may not necessarily be, helping your brain feel as good as you want, or your body feel as strong as you want. What decisions are you going to make? So, it's really very similar to how we as adults function.
Yeah, and I think the knowing versus doing gap, I think a few people might feel called out when they hear that, but
Yeah.
it is a choice, and helping them, make it as a choice. So what are we talking about? I'm talking about, dietary choices. Like you just mentioned in your book, you talk a lot about how kids can build healthy microbiomes, and it's, a diverse diet, lots of colorful fruits and vegetables, different types of fibers, and prebiotic kind of foods. Now, I have lived overseas for a few years, and things are a little different here, but I know that is not probably a super common or typical way for kids in the States to eat. And I'm sure that's a reason why we're seeing so much rise in a lot of different chronic diseases as kids. But getting a kid on board with trying a bunch of new foods, or eating in a different way than their friends eat, or eating more vegetables, or, those kind of things, especially if it's, somebody who's doing kind of an intervention, like their kid has health issues and they're trying to get them healthier. And it's kind of like almost an abrupt switch, like we were living like this and now we're going to eat like this and we're going to try these new foods. How do you find that goes over? Like, how do you navigate that with parents and with kids, especially maybe smaller kids, like, under 10 or like that age? How do you navigate that?
So, I mean, I navigate everything with kids by just explaining it to them because when they understand the why, even in very simple terms, it's so much easier for them to understand, the how of it and be more committed to it. And I talk to kids from the very beginning about their microbiome because as we know, and especially for children, how their microbiome shapes and develops, especially in those early days. Again, those first 1,000 days from the moment they're born to about maybe 2.5 to 3 years of age, where the microbiome takes on a little bit more of an adult-like pattern. There is such a profound connection between how the microbiome shapes their developing immune system. With, if there's disruption, there can be increased risks for at pretty much every single allergic disorder, which we are seeing on the rise. Anaphylactic food allergies, eczema, asthma, hay fever, hives. And how the microbiome impacts their developing brains. We know disruption to their gut microbiome, especially early on, can significantly increase the risks for mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders when they are older kids and teenagers. So I don't talk to kids about that. I definitely share with parents, right, that we want to be informed about, how kids' microbiomes become disrupted. But with kids, I talk to them about, this amazing, amazing ecosystem inside their tummies. And, as kids get older, even in preschool, kids are learning about taking care of the world, right? There's Earth Day, and we learn to, reduce, reuse, recycle, all the things to take care of our world's ecosystem, because if we don't, the world will no longer be able to take care of us. Right. We are living in a way that we are disrupting the ability of the world to sustain us, which is really frightening. So I talked to them about this ecosystem inside their tummies, these trillions of friends that live in their tummies that really are this ecosystem of microscopic organisms that take care of them, take care of not just their tummies, but, their brains and how they think and feel and their immune system and, how often they get sick or how quickly they bounce back from being sick and even their muscles and, learning how to play the piano or whatever it is. That's the role of your friends, your tiny little friends in your tummy. That is their job. And our job is to take care of that ecosystem. So then when kids really learn that and understand that, it's amazing what good, stewards of their internal ecosystem they can be. I mean, I remember when my kids were learning about, taking care of the earth and reducing and reusing and recycling, and they came home and they were so on top of me and Peter about that goes in the recycling and no, that goes in the green, the green bin, right? Because they really felt like I'm responsible for this world. So, kids can learn how to take ownership. And that goes to, even, so let's say they're older. We can still talk about this model of this ecosystem, but then we make it really relevant for them. I mean, a middle schooler or an elementary school, for them, it may be, I want to have the most accurate, free shots, free throws in basketball, right? Or I want to be, really calm and know my lines for the school play. So we can tie pretty much every concern they have back with taking care of their microbiome. And for teenagers, I mean, their skin, right? The gut-skin connection with their acne, or that gets a lot of kids, right? Like it's their skin. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna.
It would have got me
right?
if somebody would have talked to me. Like I had bad acne in high school, and I grew up. We had a backyard swimming pool. I was in chlorine water like constantly. I ate tons of not good food. I stayed up all night. Like I took a zillion antibiotics as a kid. I had the whole recipe for that like pink chunky antibiotic liquid.
Oh yeah, that's amoxicillin, the pink bubble gum one.
God,
it's still around. That's right.
Bubble gum is a very generous way to describe the flavor of that stuff. But I got a lot of ear infections. I got tested for strep throat. Like I don't know how many times, to the point where I was scared to go to the doctor because they always jab that thing down your throat.
Oh gosh.
And so the stick with the anyways. All of it. And so I had bad acne, and like nobody ever suggested that it had anything to do with any of the stuff that we're talking about here. It was
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
buy the thing from the store that's like acid and put it on your skin. That was like the solution
Yep.
to it. And then I would like burn the hell out of my face. And so I would have bought into that because of the motivation. And so it's like you're saying, like, find their motivation, find the thing that motivates that kid, because you can tie the microbiome and health of their microbiome in their gut into almost any
Absolutely.
thing
Yep.
that they want, right? Or anything they don't want, or whatever the
Yeah.
situation is. So that's really helpful for food. And then, like, so you find that kids are more open then, once they understand this, to kind of eating the food that I like the way you say it, there are trillions of friends in their tummy, the food that those friends want, they become more open to eating
Yeah.
foods that they
Yeah.
maybe weren't eating before.
Absolutely. At least thinking about it, right? And then when we talk to them, and so as a mom and as a pediatrician, I understand if you're going to make something stick as a habit. First of all, it's got to be something that you can do every day, right? It's not just a one-off. Like, this is all about how do we create these lifestyle changes, right? And it's also really about making it fun and memorable and doable. Because if it's not memorable and fun, I mean, it's going to be hard to sustain it. It might be something you do for a couple of weeks or a month, and then you're like, it's just too much to think about. So you want to make it almost autopilot. And when we think about, I in the book I talk about the 5 things for microbiome magic. How do we create resilience in your gut microbiome so that your skin and your hair and your muscles and whatever it is you want to be better, can improve. And one of the cores, of course, is how we eat. And there's a couple of different options, but we know, our microbiome, what do they need? Our microbiota, right? Those tiny, tiny trillions of friends, they need plants. Bottom line, like, they need to eat plants. And the foods that really sustain them are plants. And so I talk about our microbiome champions as the 3 Fs. So trying to remember that it's fiber, phytonutrients, which I know is a PH, but it sounds like an F. So fiber, phytonutrients, and fermented foods. So thinking more broadly, because every kid and parent has heard eat the rainbow, but they're applying that to fruits and vegetables. When we're thinking about, our whole gut rainbow, it's not just fruits and vegetables. It's really, look at the Mediterranean diet. It's full of whole grains and legumes and nuts and seeds. If you can tolerate those, your legumes, nuts, and seeds and whole grains are going to pack way more fiber per bite than most fruits and vegetables. But then also thinking about the color. So every single color of the rainbow that we can think of in our fruits and vegetables, they have a different phytonutrient. People listening have heard of quercetin or resveratrol from red grapes, or EGCG, from green tea, genistein from soy. Well, our microbiota use each of those phytonutrients, or phytochemicals, you might hear them called, to produce and produce changes and byproducts that shift our epigenetics. That's fascinating, right? These are sometimes even called epinutrients. They can help really influence how our genes work for us or against us as we get older. And so with color, I have kids think about, if you don't like, 10 different kinds of fruits and vegetables, but you love broccoli. All right. A lot of kids love broccoli. Well, how about going to the farmer's market and trying to find some purple broccoli? Because that's a different color, different phytonutrients. That still counts as another thing, right? We have all sorts of different colors of cauliflower around us, and bell peppers come in different colors. So each color matters. So it's just trying to make these small little shifts there. And one of the things I talk about in the book, but also I talk with kids about, is trying to make every meal or snack pop. And what that means is, how can we make whatever we're eating pop with plants on purpose? And so, if we're thinking about, let's say in the morning you're having a bowl of oatmeal and you have some raisins on there and some flax seeds, that's great, right? But how about then, if we want to make it pop, we're thinking about what's one more thing we can add to give it more microbiome power. And so, maybe go to the pantry and find some pumpkin seeds that are kind of somewhere in the back and sprinkle that on. Or, if you have some fresh blueberries in your fridge, put that on. So just what's one more thing? And when we think about that one more thing, there's always one more thing we can add. And it can even be spices, cinnamon counts. If you're making mashed potatoes and you put garlic in there, hey, how about reach for the parsley? I mean, that's going to count, right? So we're trying to make it just really simple, easy, and doable. And so, yeah, making meals pop is another way. I remember talking about this in a little master class I was teaching, and a mom wrote me immediately afterwards and said my little 4-year-old was kind of listening in because I do everything with a lot of color and try to make it fun. And so she was kind of looking to see what was so colorful on her screen and with all the poop emojis and, the things. And I was talking about making meals pop. And as soon as we got off, Mom started to make dinner. And her 4-year-old went up to her and asked, "Are we going to make it pop?" And so it was so cute. And then she said, even the next morning, as the dad was making breakfast, the daughter asked the same thing. "What are you going to do to make it pop?" And so, those kind of things, will stick even as they get older. You can think, oh, I mean, that's what I do now is I think, okay, I make a salad. Oh, what's one more thing I can kind of add on? That's probably in your pantry or your fridge.
Yeah, and it kind of gamifies it. Like it
Mm-hmm.
makes it fun. And then the parents are being held accountable. So that's it's like reverse of I've had other people come on and talk about like how nefarious marketing is that targets kids for like breakfast cereals or I don't know, insert random thing that's
Oh, yeah.
probably not good for the kids. And then they trick the kid into wanting it so that the kid will drag the parent to buy the thing because the marketing is aimed at the kids. This is like
Yeah.
backwards. It's kind of like getting parents into doing the thing that's beneficial for them. So, and those acronyms and everything make it a lot easier. This is awesome stuff about food and kind of how to do this. And I've been trying to do this myself ever since we've been, for the last couple of months working on a course with Kiran Krishnan from Microbiome Labs. And he talks about a lot of the same principles regarding, feeding the microbiome. So I now am, when I'm cooking something or making something, I'm like, all right, this has 4 things in it. I need to put 7 things in it. Like I can find a few more things to put in
That's
this.
right.
And I found like combinations that I thought were strange that actually work pretty well. And then I heard you mention that the Mediterranean diet, for anybody listening who doesn't know, I live in Italy, and there's a lot of misconceptions around, well, one, that there's such a thing as Italian food. That doesn't exist. Italy's like 20 different little tiny countries that have different food and different language and different cultures and different, if you go up in the north, it's butter, not olive oil. It's beans, rice, not noodles as much or not as much pasta. Like there's no spicy food in the north. There's spicy food. So it's way different. But around here, I live in Tuscany, which is like north-ish, and there's tons of beans to the point where other Italians refer to Tuscans as bean eaters in like a negative way.
Oh my
And
gosh, I've never heard that before.
yeah, because
Wow.
there's like, if you go to the little grocer, there's probably 6, maybe more different types of like very regional local beans that you can buy that
Yeah.
some are pink, some are white, some are, brown, some are whatever. And they eat a lot of lentils here, lentils, beans. There is, what is with the rice that you cook forever that gets soft?
The risotto?
Risotto. That's more not here, but they eat it here. So like, yes, they eat a lot of pasta, but the misconception is that like every meal in Italy is pasta
Yeah.
is the carb. And it's definitely not. They eat a lot of beans, they eat a lot of grains, they eat farro, a lot of farro.
Yes.
Which I never had before I lived here, which is
Oh, I love it.
sort of like barley. It's a little bit more oomph than couscous
Like
or
chewier,
something.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's really good. And so they do eat a lot of different forms of like fibrous foods as well. And it's not just pasta. And even the pasta here, if you go into like a traditional grocer around here, they'll have pasta in like a bunch of different types of traditional grains.
Yeah.
It's not all
Yep.
just like highly refined white flour pasta like you'll see in the stores a lot of times in the States. It's like different colors and different, you can read history on the back of the bags of this grain comes from this place. So it is way, way, way more diverse in sources of fiber than people would think. But this is all like dietary stuff and food things. On our, I think it was a brain and nervous system masterclass of ours that you were on, you talked about meditation and mindfulness practices and like breathing exercise and even like coherence or heart rate variability practices, like those kind of things for kids. Because I think we were talking about pans and pandas and things like that, and ways to calm nervous system down in highly activated states. Because there's a book, you've probably read it or you know of it. There's a book out now called, I think it's called The Anxious Generation or The Anxiety Generation.
It's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah, and I've only seen synopsis of it and like bullet points taken from it and like facts taken from it. So I don't want to quote it necessarily because I haven't read the whole thing, but there's some information that's come out of that book that's alarming with amount of anxiety in like Gen Z and younger, like because of social media, because, well, the theories are because of social media, because of the phones, because of the screens, because of all these things. And so kids are like more dysregulated than ever when it comes to the nervous system.
Yeah.
So, and not just kids that have PANS or PANDAS or conditions like that you work with, but like all the kids. And so I was so surprised the first time you talked about it, that you have kids, small kids too, do meditation or do breathing exercises. And then I saw you post a picture or something of your son who was really little doing meditation or something.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe you get him to do that. And you're like, get him to do it. He likes to do it. So like, how do you introduce that to kids and parents, like because I mean, sure, you work collaboratively with parents and kids, like how do you introduce those things to them and like get them on board with doing those things?
So, I mean, first, it's really got to be something that you do every day, right? And well, I guess there's two different issues here or factors. The first is still the education. So I still talk to kids about the gut-brain connection and what that means, right? Because every kid has had experiences of being really worried about something or feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't manage whatever's going on, even if you're a toddler, and of course, all the way up through our adolescence, because we have our crisis of mental health in our kids and teenagers. And so I talk to them about how that really does stem too from their gut microbiome and all of the neurotransmitters that we think are brain chemicals. I mean, most of them are made by our gut microbiota.
Yeah.
And so, helping them to connect that and teaching them about what the vagus nerve is. And I talk to them about, they have this information superhighway. It's a two-way street of communication that goes from the gut to the brain and the brain to the gut. And that's called the vagus nerve. And guess what? That vagus nerve, it controls virtually every single internal organ. And that is what we need to kick in when we're feeling anxious or stressed about something. And so they get that context of what the vagus nerve is, not in sort of a, I hate to say it this way, but, a lot of people, when we're talking about mind-body medicine, it's kind of more in that woo-woo, realm. And a lot of kids are kind of rolling their eyes or parents are rolling their eyes. And it's like, no, this is actually, there's a real physiologic process going on. This is what's happening. And when we're anxious or stressed, and also, by the way, if we have any chronic inflammatory condition going on, the vagus nerve is what will pull things back and rebalance our brain, our nervous system, our immune system, our gut, our cardiovascular system, all of that. And so it puts that into context, makes it a little more concrete, makes it a little bit more like, oh, okay, this is something I have to do really for health reasons, not just to feel good. So then that gets a little bit more interest. And when I talk about vagus nerve work, I start with things that, I say, look, these are things that you can do every day. Again, I'm not asking you to add anything on, but one of the easiest things that you can do every day to kick in your vagus nerve is to learn how to breathe with your belly. So do that diaphragmatic breathing. And we sit in the office and I'll sit with the parents and, demonstrate what diaphragmatic breathing is with keeping your shoulder down while you're taking breaths in and only inhaling and inflating the balloon in your belly while keeping your shoulders down, and then exhaling and deflating the balloon in your belly, again, keeping your shoulders down. It is fascinating to see the parents and the kids where they're really trying to concentrate on their breathing, and it's not natural anymore. And they're kind of, when they're breathing in, most of us kind of, right, we breathe in with our shoulders and we go down. And so they're trying to figure out how to keep their shoulders still. And so it takes practice. We have, as a society, really forgotten how to do this very natural diaphragmatic breathing that when you watch babies sleeping and breathing, that's what they're doing. They don't care about their bellies pooching out. Their bellies are kind of going out and in.
They haven't been taught that that's some sort of negative thing.
That's right. That's right. And when kids and teenagers and adults, for that matter, can really learn how to focus on their breath and, really do that diaphragmatic breathing, you can do that anywhere, anytime, without anyone knowing that you're doing anything, right? Because a lot of teenagers are like, I don't want to do tapping or, sit and meditate because I'm going to look weird, right? And so, I get that. They don't want to look like they're doing something different, but breathing, you can do that anywhere. So I feel like that's just the most powerful thing that we can teach from an early age. When we're getting really, anxious about something, or, we just got a horrible text from a friend, or we saw something on social media that was mean, and we're kind of, getting into that fight or flight. Okay, if we just remember, okay, slow your breath down and then focus on the diaphragmatic breathing. Just after 10 breaths, you're just more clear in how you want to respond to that situation. Or, as a baby or a toddler, if you're seeing, your child getting worked up, then just sit down and say, you know what, mommy's going to do something or daddy's going to do something. And, I feel a little anxious. Are you feeling anxious? Or give them words for their feelings, right? Are you so frustrated that you can't get the circle in the square? Well, let's just sit and, I'm going to breathe. Do you want to breathe with me? And just model just like those slow breaths that can sit on your lap. There's something beautiful too with babies and kids. Your teenagers may not want to do that so much. I still get my hugs in whenever I can, but if they're sitting with you, back to your chest, or if you're hugging, and you can regulate your nervous system, slow down your breathing, which then slows down your heart rate, and just really slow yourself down. And which can be hard if your child is super upset and and you may also be triggered by that too, but you slow yourself down. That will help co-regulate your child. Co-regulation is phenomenal. It's the same reason why, and kids are especially attuned to how their parents are feeling. It's the same thing when you walk through the door, or let's say, you're in the living room and, your wife walks through the door, or maybe, when your son's older, walks through the door. And even if you haven't seen their face or looked at them, you can feel how they're feeling. Like if you really are still and pay attention. And that's because we're constantly co-regulating with the energy around us. And so I would say, as a parent, again, this is so cliche, put your own life mask on first, but oxygen mask on first, but it is so important. If we want to help our kids get out of fight or flight, or, help them with focus, help them manage whatever stress is going on, if we start with us, it helps them as they're starting to learn these tools.
For sure. And we're not trying to attack anybody out here or judge anyone. Like, I started learning about all this when I started doing all the trauma work like 6 years ago. And I started to think back to like things that happened when I raised my first son, and like times I was like really stressed out or really freaked out, and I was 18, 19-year-old with a kid.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh man, he was around me and I was so stressed and I was this, and I started beating myself up, and then that's not good either. So everybody's doing the best that they can with the knowledge that they have, but this co-regulation and also like mirroring. I love that you said, are you really frustrated? What I like to do when I'm frustrated is do breathing. And then, because I think this might have been before we were recording, but he'll do anything I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goes every which way. And for parents, that goes every way, that they'll do anything they see you
That's
doing.
right.
And so we project, I think, like I did the first time you told me about these things you have kids do, whether it's these apps with the meditation or the breathing or heart math things or whatever. I was like, man, that's really weird for a kid to do that. Like, I couldn't imagine like little kids doing that. And me projecting that on a little kid would make them think it was weird and make them not do it. Whereas if I'm doing it, they're going to want to do it. And then they won't even think it's weird. Just like they're not self-conscious about letting their belly come out when they breathe. They have no idea. You tell a little 3-year-old, like they would have no concept of that. Like it would be so silly. Right. It'd be so silly to them. Like it should be silly to us, but and I started learning the breathing cue is great about keeping your shoulders down. I teach a lot of breathing and breath work things that I'll usually tell the group, like take a big deep breath, and 90% of them go.
That's right. Yeah.
And they breathe through their mouth, their shoulder goes up. It's a short, shallow breath, but it's fast. And then teaching them to breathe through their belly without their shoulders moving, it's really difficult for some people.
It is very difficult. Yes.
And I think the kids will pick it up faster probably than the adults, because they don't have as much time in dysfunctional breathing.
Yeah. It can be, I find it can be easier to have kids, and grown-ups to just lay down and practice that, because then
Mhm.
you can't really lift your shoulders up, and then even place a little, like a little notebook on their chest so that they're looking and seeing that, you really just want to fill your diaphragm and your belly up. So,
Mhm.
and I love that, that you said just, don't judge yourself, because we all come to this at different times. And
Yeah.
even for me, as I was doing this work. I was an integrative pediatrician. I mean, when I was pregnant with my kids, I mean, long before I was pregnant with my kids, but there are still things that I've learned that I'm like, oh God, why didn't I learn that? And also, honestly, a lot of these habits and things that I talk and teach about, we didn't start doing them until my kids were older. I mean, you can start these if the younger they are. I mean, just even like, learning how to read food labels. I mean, your toddler can't read, but they sure can. You can show them, oh, look, let's turn the package on the back, and oh, mommy's going to read these ingredients. And some of them, I mean, if they might see like, oh, blueberries or rice or whatever it is. Do you know what that is? Oh, what about mono and diglycerides? Do you know what that is? And just use that as an opportunity to say, oh, well, yeah, that's a chemical. That's not real food. So, we probably don't want to put this in our bodies. So just using all of those
Mhm.
opportunities so that it becomes a habit that once they're in, 12, 13, going out with their friends on their own, to wherever, downtown or the movies, and buying their own food, it's just habitual to kind of turn the package over. And I mean, I'm not going to say my kids don't ever choose like the Mike and Ike's and whatever, like the gross stuff that I'm cringing at, but at least they have that habit, so that I'm
Mhm.
confident that when they get older, when they're out of the house on their own in college and beyond, that they're going to be able to look at packages and know which foods are kind of better, healthier for their microbiomes and for them, and which foods they want to find replacements for.
Yeah, it's I think getting the habits set early, it's everything's like almost like muscle memory in essence. It's not the same thing. It's more neuroplasticity, but it's like it's harder to break habits and break patterns and change things the longer that you've been ingrained in them. So like starting when you're 35 is going to be harder,
Yep.
at 35 than it would be if you were 6 and you were kind of doing it
Yeah.
and kind of setting the stage. And um, I like to teach people breathing on the ground too. You mentioned that. I like it because they can also feel the back part of their body inflate, like because it's
Yeah.
360 degrees. It's not just in the front. And I
That's
found
right.
that if there's like a seat behind them or something on the ground, it's easy to feel like that more multi-directional expansion with the breathing. But so many good tips here, so many good suggestions on how to help kids kind of make these healthy choices part of their life, and to whether it's mindfulness or meditation or breathing or how they're breathing, or it's the foods and the microbiome champions and getting more plants in the diet, or things, like it would fit to exercise. Like that never used to be a problem with kids. Like in my generation was the
Yeah.
first one to have video games, but we still played like tons outside and tons of sports and ran around and were crazy. I think that
Yep.
now is like the first couple generations where sedentary children is a thing.
It is a huge problem, and it became much worse over the pandemic, with
Yeah.
Zoom school. But it's not just Zoom schooling. I mean, never before have kids had constant attachment to a device
Yeah.
that then, they're sitting and they're looking at it. I mean, even, I mean, you
And they
look at
don't go to like hang out with the like when my son that's an adult now was in like high school, whenever video games started being played like together with other people, mostly online, which was probably when he was in high school, we didn't have that. So even if we were playing video games, if we wanted to play video games, like all of us had to go to someone's house to
that's
play
right.
to play the video game.
Yes.
So then we'd be sitting around playing the video game, but like you'd play it for a while, then you'd go play basketball, you'd do something
That's right.
outside, you'd go to somebody else's house, or you'd walk to the food place, or you'd do whatever thing. And now they don't have to leave the house and they don't hang out with
No.
each other, and they just sit
Yeah.
there and they're all quote hanging out, but they're not hanging out, and there's
They're
no
not.
transportation, there's no movement, there's no activity. So like I would guess that exercise even falls in this too. It's like teaching them what it does for their body, teaching them how much better they'll feel, teaching them ways to do it easily and
Yeah.
do things that are fun, gamifying it. Like these principles probably apply to like every type of modification of lifestyle or diet that you'd want to do, right? Even getting them to go to bed earlier or
Absolutely. And, when we think about the screen time and, it's diverges in the kind of puberty years once kids start having phones a lot of kids are getting phones very early on,
Yeah.
but it tends to be that boys are more, towards the video games, and then there's the addictive piece that can become a really big problem. For girls, it's more the social media, and with that comes the increase in anxiety and depression. Regardless, some of the studies have found that the higher the hours of screen time. I mean, I was just looking at this one study that 5 or more hours per day of screen time, which actually is very easy to do. I mean, you look at kids' screen time and it's shocking that some of them have 7, 8 plus hours. And you're like, weren't you in school? Like, what did you do? Right. But that, like 5 or more hours, could increase the suicide risk in these kids by 50%. And there was still, even at 2 hours or less, there was still an increased risk for suicide. And that becomes, more pronounced with our girls. But one of the most protective factors in the studies that have looked at, okay, well, let's, phones, screens, they're a part of life. I mean, we're not going to ever go back to a time where they're not there unless, the world's electricity shuts down, right? But really, what else can we do? The single most protective factor was face-to-face, in-person communication. Not sitting next to your friends on a device, but getting together and hanging out, walking around downtown or going to the park or, just face to face talking, making eye contact, laughing and doing all the things.
Who'd have thunk it?
I know, right? I mean, it's just
such a mystery.
We have to get back to that balance because like I said, our kids and teens, their mental health is in crisis. And with Jonathan Haidt's book, there is thankfully more awareness and more countries even that are starting to think about banning social media until you're a certain age, which I think is really important. But it's also
taking phones away,
schools are taking phones away, putting them in. I mean, my daughter has like a little bag, a little wall cubby that all the students have to put their phones in. And, we're making steps, but it also starts with parents. I mean, there's a report that came out earlier this year showing that parents who are distracted on their cell phones when they're interacting with their kids cause more distress in kids. I mean, those kids are more distressed and anxious. And that makes sense too. And we have to absolutely model that, look, when we get in the door, we can put our device away and be, 100% mindful. And of course, there's real life and you may have to get to an email or maybe there's an urgent text or whatever it is. All right, honey, I'm going to take, I need 5 minutes to do this. And then it goes away again, right? And so, we have to be able to model that. Otherwise, we cannot expect immature brains to just be able
see their
do
parent
it.
on the phone for 4 hours after they get off work, and then saying,
That's right.
"No, you can't be on a phone." It's like, yeah, right. I'm going to just go over there and do it.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not like. I'm far from perfect. And this is something that because sometimes I'll come home and have this list of things from work still to do. And I immediately, like you said, I'll go on and try to send off a few emails. And, when you're home, that time with your kids, try to be fully present. And then, like I said, if you need to have 20 minutes, half an hour, then say, I need to carve this time out. I'm just going to finish this. Get it done. Don't try to interact with your kids, send an email, send an email, right?
Because get the things done and be there.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, we're out of time. That was a lot of really helpful tips and suggestions. And I think it comes down to modeling. I think it comes down to, educating them at the level that they're able to receive to help them understand what the benefits are, why they might want to do it. And then making things, easy, accessible, fun, almost like a game and playing the game also yourself.
Yes.
Like, this isn't you're making your kids do all these things. It's everyone's doing these things together for the benefit of them and you. So it's a double win because everyone feels better.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Where should people go if they want to get your book or learn about your work or find you or learn more?
Yeah. So my website is www.healthykidshappykids.com. You can find my book pretty much anywhere books are sold. I mean, of course, Amazon carries it, but also Barnes & Noble, Walmart, Target online. And then, of course, if you have your, local indie bookstores, then please support them. I actually had a doctor friend of mine. She's from, I think she's from Bulgaria. And she sent me a picture that she found my book on the bookshelf in this small, little bookstore there. It was so great.
Wow.
So, yeah. So look at your local bookstores. I was, we have a little kids bookstore in our town, and I walked in, and my kids actually were the first ones to see it. They're like, Mom, look. And so, it's so great, to be able to spread the word. So, and then on Instagram is where I'm most active. So that's healthykids_happykids.
Great. And you share so much amazing info. This is just the tip of it. So if you want like a million tips on happy, healthy kids, follow the Instagram, check out the book. There's a wealth. You're very generous with your time and sharing your expertise. So thank you so much. I always enjoy these conversations. I always learn a lot, and I take a lot of notes on how to do with my own little guy. So he thanks you too, and look forward to connecting in the future.
All right. Thanks, Michael.